Hey, everybody, this is Michael Gabriel, and you're watching CMS TV.
And joining us today on this episode, we got guitar extraordinaire who can not only shred with the best of them, but he makes the greatest facial expressions while doing so. And of course, I'm talking about Mr. Paul Gilbert. Paul, thanks for coming on with us. How are you, man?
I'm doing good. I've got Iron Maiden in my head. Lately, the Paul Di'Anno era, like that. Scream! Vasi! Oh, that stuff's so killer. Man, I love it.
Awesome.
Bruce Dickinson's awesome, too.
Of course.
Absolutely. Agreed, no doubt. All right, Paul. Well, hey, man, thanks for coming on with us. Let's get, I guess, right to it. Werewolves of Portland, your 16th solo record. And this is indeed a true solo record because you played and recorded every instrument yourself on it. And man, I'll tell you, I didn't realize you could play drums the way you do too, man. Very impressive with what you've done on this record. So why don't you just start off by having you, I guess, tell us a bit about your experience of being the lone musician on the record, and kind of when did you realize that you could, make this happen?
Well, playing drums was really fun, and I needed it because everybody's quarantined, you can't go outside and run around. So to be able to like move my arms and my legs and beat on stuff with a stick, hit my hand on the lamp, sorry, that just felt great. And and I haven't played drums, and I mean I played a lot over time, but I haven't practiced in years, so I didn't know if I could do it. I got together with an engineer, and I just said, I've got this crazy idea. I'm going to try to play everything, and if it doesn't work, tell me, and we'll fix it somehow. But we started with the easiest song, and I got through that, and then the next song was the hardest song, and we got through that, and after that I knew I was okay. So that was obviously you can't play live, so you got to make some guesses about what the parts are going to be, but it all came together really good.
Excellent, man. Well, Paul, talk a little bit about when the differences between being in a band environment versus being in a solo environment. I mean, as an example, for Mr. Big, I assume that you write more toward what you think the audience is going to appreciate, where solo, maybe you can really stretch out and go with what you appreciate to, almost to keep your own creative juices flowing. Is that sort of accurate?
I would say well, Mr. Big's been around a long time. In the early days, we just wanted to establish ourselves as a band.
Sure.
And it was a true band. We all listened to each other. We'd collaborate on the songwriting, and that was my dream. I grew up listening to bands. I wanted to be in one, so we tried to make it work the way it does. As time went on, we started to find our own styles, and sometimes I would bring music that wouldn't fit what really Mr. Big was about.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's when I started, doing my solo stuff, and also, had reformed Racer X, because my solo stuff in the 90s tended to be more pop than what Mr. Big was doing.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Racer X stuff was heavier. So it was sort of, a little not the right direction either way. Later on, as I started to get back into blues, I really felt that I had something to offer to Mr. Big again, because Mr. Big always had the kind of a bluesy edge, especially with Eric's style of singing. So that's when we reunited in around 2009, maybe it was. I was excited about it because I thought, man, I got this whole new vocabulary of blues stuff that I can bring to the band, and it felt like I was deeper as a songwriter. It was really that was a really good reunion for the right reasons. And so that worked out great. And I like that record that we did, What If? I thought it turned out good.
Yeah.
And my solo stuff is really different, over the years. Like it started off kind of wanting to be a pop singer with crazy solos in the background. Then I did, instrumental stuff that was a little more, really not melodic. And if it was purposefully not melodic, because I thought melodies were for singers. And if you do a guitar record, there's no singer, so why have the melody? So I was trying to do like what guitar players do, which is like a lot of riffs and a lot of burning solos. And I thought if I want a melody, I'll get a singer. And then now I'm trying to be the singer on guitar, by playing a slide and trying to write the way a singer would using lyrics, and basically, now I'm embracing melody, but in order to do that, I've had to kind of really learn a new way of playing guitar, because it's very different than the way I played, growing up, where the singer had that job.
No question. Now, Paul, I listening through, I want to point to Hello, North Dakota, which is the first song that you shared with everybody. It's got such a classic rock sounding feel to it. For you, were you going for that style there, or is it kind of the product of the environment that you've now put yourself in, or is it a little bit of both, or just what you were feeling at the moment? Talk a little bit about that.
Let's see. Well, that's there's a lot of different stuff in it. It begins with actually the North Dakota state song, like. North Dakota. It's very, very, and that's not rock at all. And I really had this kind of study to figure that out, because I did it with like sort of a Brian May style 5-part guitar harmony. And I guess in a way that's classic rock, because certainly Queen is a great classic rock band. So I kind of took something, and then they had some classical sounding things. They were kind of operatic in a way. And then I come into something that's more like the Who or Cheap Trick, and I'm doing like Allman Brothers style, some slides. So that it's a really dramatic shift of style, within the first 20 seconds of the song. And then I start getting into the melody. As long as they don't steal my guitar collection. And of course, I can't sing that well, so I play with slide. But and then again, the song's a lot of parts. I ended up then going to a part that's. And I don't know where I got that. I mean, to me, that almost sounds like a Zakk Wylde Ozzy thing or something. And then I get to more like Van Halen's open string. So there's a lot of stuff. That's a really dense song. It's got more parts than I would normally have. And then on from there, it's got like a 6/8 and a. And that's more like that, like a pub waltz or something,
right?
So there's so many parts of the song that it's hard to pin it down to one. But everything's filtered through me, and my era is 1964 to 1984. From right. The first Beatles album to the last Van Halen album with David Lee Roth. That's sort of like what I always feel formed my instincts and formed what I'm looking for. And certainly, I began to explore on both sides of that era. But that's you can't help when you're born, and that's that's when I really was listening to the radio, my parents' record collection, my uncle's record collection, and that's where that all came from.
No doubt. Now, when you're putting together solo records, I'm assuming I'm not going to say like them better than band environment, because that's kind of it's hard to say you don't like something that you've done for 30 years and you've been massively successful about. But I have to imagine that writing solo stuff where it's completely your idea set and really your time to explore on the guitar, which is, your number one passion, I'm assuming that that's more fulfilling for you. Is that accurate?
Well, there's different ways to be fulfilled. I mean, if I had never been able to be in a band, I think I would really, I'd really feel that something was missing.
Sure.
That was my original goal. I wanted to be in a band, and I'm really happy I could. I mean, even as a kid, the just being in cover bands as a teenager, that was great. And I was always in bands with older guys. So I would learn. They would turn me on to other music. You couldn't Google search back then. So it'd be like, man, let's go over to the bass player's house and see what records he has.
Right.
And that man, he's got Emerson, Lake and Palmer. I never heard of them before, or Utopia. I'd always make these discoveries from hanging out with the older cats. And then with the same thing with Mr. Big. I was the youngest guy in the band, so I had the advantage of their experiences being on tour. Billy had already been on tour with David Lee Roth. Pat Torpey had been on tour, opening for Robert Plant and playing with all these different people. And so a lot of times I would just sit back and kind of watch.
Sure.
The pros and to see what they did, and then try to step in and not muck it up too bad.
Right.
So I'm really glad I had that experience. Now, of course, the downside is you come up with something that is a little, that's sort of something that maybe you would only do on your own. Like I remember coming up with the song "Green Tinted '60s Mind," Mr.
Right.
Big song. That whole thing, and I wrote all the lyrics and of course the title, and so here I come to rehearsal. I said, I've got this song called "Green Tinted '60s Mind," and the band looked at me like, that's the worst title ever. That's just weird, Can't you write, how about a song called Stone Love, or I don't know what, something more normal,
Right.
And it was really there was. I didn't think that was going to end up on the record until like the last minute, because the producer liked it and Pat, the drummer, they were kind of like, I think it's a good song. Let's put it on, even though it's weird. Let's put it on there. And so that's just part of my nature. Like I come up with stuff. I have a feeling if I came to Mr. Big and said, I got this song called "Argument About Pie," I think the conversation would end right there. It'd just be like, no. That's not to go do that in your solo thing. Right. And so it's really nice to have both things, because to play with Mr. Big, we got to do 3 sold out nights at the Budokan and make some great music that I wouldn't have made on my own because of the sensibilities of the other guys. So it's I'd hate to have to commit to only one, but certainly the other way, I remember just having all this creativity and things I wanted to do, and I knew it wasn't right for the band.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really nice to have that feeling that people have a sense of who I am as a person. Where with Mr. Big, I could be like kind of like this cool. I mean, I don't know whatever I was with Mr. Big, but it was a version of myself that wasn't complete. Mm-hmm. And it was. I remember being on stage in Japan, and we were playing these huge venues, and I would look into the audience and see everybody smiling, and I'm thinking they have no idea who I really am.
Right.
and this is still wonderful, and I'm glad they like me, but they don't really know me, and that's what my solo career has allowed me to do.
No question. Now, Paul, you mentioned Japan, and I wanted to bring this up briefly as somebody. I lived in Korea for 2.5 years, right at the beginning of the Mr. Big run.
Wow.
So I used to take you guys didn't come to Korea at that time. You stopped at Japan, and I used to take the little military hops and see huge places like the Big Egg in Nagoya and places like that. And I try to explain it to people just how big you guys were in Japan, and people don't get it. They're like, oh yeah, it's Mr. Big. I saw him open for Rush or something,
Yeah.
And they don't get that in the Far East, you guys were the Beatles of that time. You guys and Dokken, for some reason, both bands were enormous. So in your mind, talk a little bit about why that was. Do you have any idea why it was that the Japanese people or the Far East people gravitated so well to your music?
I don't know exactly. I mean, it was a wonderful thing, and but we were all surprised. Like, I mean, I think you could look at the other way, like, why weren't we as big everywhere? But you know, in a way, we're too busy to contemplate. You know, we were just touring, recording, constantly working, and if anything, I kind of remember being on tour in America, and and To Be With You had gone #1.
Okay.
And we were like doing a tour of like big clubs, small theaters, and our manager came and to meet with us, and he said you guys, this is amazing what you've done. He said this is never going to happen again, and ever. So all this extra stuff, the work you have to do now, going on the Letterman show and Tonight Show, I know you're not going to get any sleep because you got to take the red eye to get there,
right?
But do it now because this is it. I guess he knew something about the business, being a manager,
right.
and he said, like, after this, it's going to be all Janet Jackson and like rap and soul artists, Mariah Carey, rock, it's going to survive, but you're not going to be #1 again. Forget that. Enjoy it while it lasts. And but we managed to like keep it going in Japan somehow. And so I think it was just almost like a delayed, like almost like what do you call it? Like there's a time zone difference, like a jet lag. But it was a jet lag of 10 years.
Right. No, it's crazy. Well, Paul, you, in addition to having the new record out, you also have, new gear with the Mojo Mojo Paul Gilbert edition. Talk a little bit about that.
Oh, I've got actually 2 overdrive pedals that are signature. One is the Mojo Mojo, which I've been using for years. It's a really simple. Sometimes I think of it. It's like the Toyota Camry of overdrive pedals, which is that it just always works. It's always there's nothing really like. There's no bells and whistles. It doesn't do like crazy stuff, or it just sounds good and it works, and you're sort of glad you brought it to the gig.
Sure.
And then the other one is a JHS PG14 overdrive, and I use them together.
Okay.
I'll either have one or the other or both on. It gives me a variety that way, and that one is much more of a Ferrari. It's like you got to spend time tweaking it, and it's not that it breaks down, but there's a lot of adjustment to do. Mm-hmm. It's more a little more high powered engine, and there's been. The settings really mean something. You can get it right, you can get it wrong. But wrong could be interesting. So that one has different characters, but both together, and you're unstoppable.
Right. For you personally, when you put yourself into working on a new pedal or new gear in general, whatever it would be, even amps or any of that kind of stuff. Do you do it because there's something in your playing life that's missing that you want to see if you can fix? Or do you do it because, this pedal company reaches out to you and says, hey, we'd like to do a signature pedal with you. What do you got? What goes into your decision to work on gear?
Well, it's funny how little, I've always, been into guitars and pedals and amps, but, as a kid, I couldn't afford a lot of I couldn't afford anything new.
Right.
and maybe a new pedal, but I couldn't afford a new guitar. And so I don't think I ever even played a Fender Stratocaster, until like it was in my 30s. I had a Les Paul when I was a teenager because we found one used, really cheap.
Okay. Sure.
But I didn't even know what it was. So this is before Google, you couldn't research stuff. So a lot of the details that go into an instrument, I didn't even like scale length, which is a big deal. Like between like a Strat and a Les Paul, there's the different length of a neck, and it really changes the feel. I didn't even know that.
Right.
So a lot of the stuff that goes into what makes a guitar feel a certain way, I'm still figuring it out. I would have to say, like, I'm like anybody. I'll now that there's YouTube, I'll go on and watch pedal demos. And there's this guy named Andy who actually I found out he lives in Portland where I live. But I would watch him all the time. Goes, let's see what flanger he likes, and I'd check it out, and I'd buy one, and because I have a career. Sometimes the companies will work with me, but like the Mojo Mojo was perfect when I got it. If anything, I just didn't like the color. I thought it didn't like match my other pedals. I tend to have like bright colored pedals, and the Mojo Mojo was brown.
Right.
So I'd be sitting there looking at it, going like, "Man, this thing sounds great." I wish it were purple. And so they did that, and they said, well, as long as it's going to be your signature pedal, we got to do something to it. And I said, well, there's a switch on the top that I never use, so why don't you just make it so that switch is like preset to the setting where I use it, and then put it like in its place, put a switch that makes it go to 11. Right. And so that's what we did. So you can get it to sound exactly like the brown one, or if you need some more, you can boost it up a little more, because sometimes. With the Mojo Mojo, it's actually a fairly conservative pedal. It doesn't go really crazy. But with mine, you can make it go to 11. So if you want it to go a little crazier, it will.
Right, there you go. A Spinal Tap moment, right?
All Spinal Tap is real. That's nonfiction.
Of course. Well, Paul, no secret, the rock and metal world lost arguably the greatest influence in our time, Eddie Van Halen. And, as a guitar player and somebody that was certainly came up in his era, I'm assuming huge influence on everything you've done, especially even when you go back to like Green Tinted 60s Mind. That was, that intro was so different from what everybody was doing, and the backwards masking, it was so different, which comes out of stuff that everybody kind of saw Eddie Van Halen doing different things. So for you as a player, I'm not going to ask you were you influenced, because I know you were, but talk a little bit about his influence and, what his passing means to you as a player, not necessarily as a, human being. Yeah.
Well, at that time, I couldn't figure out the solos,
right.
I'd get a thing here or there, but they were, I was 11 years old when the first Van Halen record came out. And I had seen my uncle, because my uncle had the record, and he was much more advanced guitar player, and he had done the tapping thing. What was it? I get the real strong. So I kind of had an idea what that was. Now, I couldn't do it, but at least it wasn't a big mystery. Mm-hmm. But the thing I would gravitate towards would be the rhythm parts.
Okay.
Because those I had a fighting chance of figuring them out, and just the way Eddie played. Some stuff that on the surface would be simple. Like, You Really Got Me is a Kinks song with 2 chords, but the way the Kinks would play, or it's in G, or whatever key it's in, they'd play like a power chord, where Eddie would play it, right? And he has this thing where he'd do a quick chicka right into a single note,
right?
And that's really hard to do, to get that. Like hardly any of my, well, I'm working on it. I show that kind of stuff to my students a lot, where I make them do a chicka and then a single note, and that humbles people.
Right.
Like, oh man, I can do a note and I can do a chicka, but to do them together and have the transition be clean and that quick, and that's something that I developed from learning Eddie stuff. And but just a sense of time too, like a song like "Little Dreamer," like 3, 4. Or what was the one? And that's jazz,
right?
He's over like the minor 5 chord. I mean, I'm getting chills just hearing that. And that he got that from his dad, because his dad was a jazz clarinet player.
Sure.
And so a lot of what he does is really informed by growing up in the jazz house. He was trained as a classical pianist. So, where he was coming from in terms of what he heard was pretty sophisticated. And of course, then you add in a big dose of rock and roll, Black Sabbath, and 10 years after, and the shuffles he had were so amazing. Stuff like the Full Bug. Of course, the thing with Eddie too is Eddie Van Halen was Eddie Van Halen and Alex Van Halen,
right?
And that's made, to me, that's no more. That's so apparent whenever you hear Eddie without Alex, which is like we hear Eddie do the Beat It solo. First time I heard the Beat It solo, I remember I was a kid. And I was like washing the dishes or something, and I go like, "Man, who's this guy ripping off Eddie?" because it was so it didn't feel like him,
right?
It sounded like the licks, and obviously it was him, but without Alex, it's like half the soul was missing, and it didn't have the same life,
right,
that it had when Eddie was playing with Alex. And I remember seeing Eddie, like, he started doing guest spots on TV, like he'd sit in with the David Letterman band. Of course he was great, but the difference in like how he would move you compared to when he played with his brother,
sure,
was a whole different world, and then that time Eddie was I was so much into his playing that I may be more critical than a normal person, but to me, like, you take Alex away and it's just like, he's still great, but it's not the same,
right?
And I think those guys had a sense of that, which is why they hardly ever did anything without each other. I don't think Alex ever played with anybody ever.
Never. No, you're right.
Yeah,
you're definitely right. Yep, he definitely did. Well, I'll tell you what, Paul, let's tell people one more time about the new release. It's Werewolves of Portland. It's Paul Gilbert. And Paul, where should we tell people to go to get the new record and hear it, and tour dates? If there are any,
let's see. Stuff. Well, you can go to my website as always. I've got an Instagram channel that Paul Gilbert _official that it's me. I've actually the Facebook and Twitter is something, that's my business manager guy, but the Instagram's me.
Okay.
And I also have an online guitar school where I teach all the time. I've done like 11,000 video lessons on there, and I can listen to you play. So that's pretty cool. And it's with a company called Artist Works, right. And of course check out the new videos that I made for the song "Argument About Pie" on YouTube, and also a song called "Werewolves of Portland," and it's the only I think the only instrumental song with a lyric video, which was "Argument About Pie."
Very good, man.